Working the night shift at a convenience store has always been lonely, but I never minded the solitude. The stillness of the night was almost comforting, and I enjoyed the quiet hours to myself. The store was located on the outskirts of town, right next to an old, sprawling parking lot that was usually empty after midnight. One night around 3 a.m., I noticed a man standing at the far end of the lot. He was barely visible under the dim streetlights, and at first I thought he might be a customer heading my way, but he didn't move. He just stood there, staring toward the store. I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was waiting for someone, or his car had broken down. Still, something about the way he stood motionless unsettled me. As the minutes dragged on, he didn't budge. He didn't even shift his weight or look at his phone. He was too far away for me to make out his face, but I could feel his gaze locked on the store. I busied myself with small tasks behind the counter, glancing out the window occasionally. He was still there. I told myself not to overthink it, but my unease grew. Finally, I decided to check the security cameras. The monitor showed the parking lot in grainy black and white, and there he was, standing like a statue. But now something felt off. His stance was slightly different on the camera than what I saw out the window. It was as if he'd turned slightly, angling himself toward the camera. I couldn't take my eyes off the monitor. My pulse quickened as I noticed something else. His head seemed to tilt slightly, like he knew I was watching him. That's when the store phone rang. The sudden noise startled me. I picked up the receiver, but there was no response, just static. I hung up, but the phone rang again immediately. This time I didn't answer. I stared at the monitor, my hands trembling. The man was gone. I looked out the window, scanning the lot. It was empty. My heart was racing, and I felt a cold sweat on the back of my neck. I checked the cameras again, rewinding the footage. He had walked toward the store, but instead of coming in, he'd veered to the side, out of the camera's view. I couldn't tell where he went. For the rest of my shift, I stayed behind the counter, my eyes darting to the windows and cameras. When dawn finally broke, I locked up and left quickly, looking over my shoulder the entire way to my car. I never saw the man again, but I switched to a daytime shift shortly after that. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I'd gone outside that night, I might not have come back in. I work as a security guard at a corporate office building. My job mainly involves patrolling the floors and monitoring the cameras from the security room. The building is mostly empty at night, with only a few overnight cleaning staff here and there. It's a routine job, but one night something happened that I can't explain. It was around 2 a.m. when I decided to do a floor sweep. I took the elevator up to the 12th floor, stepped out, and began my usual walkthrough. The floor was silent, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. As I moved down the hallway, I heard a faint ding behind me. The elevator had arrived on the floor. I turned around, confused. I hadn't called for it, and there shouldn't have been anyone else in the building at that hour. I walked back toward the elevator and saw the doors open. Nobody was inside. I stepped closer, peering into the empty cab, and felt a chill. I pressed the button to send it back down to the lobby, but the doors stayed open, as if waiting for someone. I backed away, deciding to ignore it. As I continued my patrol, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I glanced over my shoulder constantly, but the hallway was always empty. When I finished the sweep, I returned to the elevator. The doors opened before I pressed the button. I stepped in cautiously and pressed the button for the lobby. The elevator started descending, but it stopped on the 9th floor. The doors opened, but again, no one was there. The floor was dark, the lights dimmed after hours. I quickly pressed the close door button, but the elevator wouldn't budge. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, faint but unmistakable, coming from the hallway. My stomach dropped. I stared into the darkness. my heart pounding. The footsteps grew louder, approaching the elevator. I jabbed the close door button repeatedly, and finally the door slid shut. I stood frozen as the elevator descended to the lobby. When the doors opened, I bolted out and ran straight to the security room. I checked the cameras, scanning the ninth floor footage. There was nothing. No movement, no shadows. But the elevator log showed it stopping on the ninth floor, just as I'd experienced. I've worked there ever since, but I avoid the ninth floor at night. Whatever happened that night, I don't want to experience it again. I used to work night shifts as a janitor at a hospital. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it paid the bills. The hospital was quiet at night, with most of the lights dimmed and only a skeleton crew of staff on duty. I was used to the eerie stillness, the faint hum of machinery, the occasional beep of a monitor, and the distant shuffle of footsteps. But one night, something happened that I'll never forget. My shift started like any other. I grabbed my cart and made my rounds, sweeping, mopping, and emptying trash bins. Around 3 a.m., I found myself cleaning the hallway outside the morgue. That area of the hospital always made me uneasy. The air was colder there, like the walls themselves absorbed the chill. The fluorescent lights seemed to flicker more often, casting strange shadows that danced on the floor. But I'd been through it so many times, I tried to shrug it off. As I mopped the floor, I heard a faint noise coming from inside the morgue. A soft thud, like something falling. I froze mid-swipe, my grip tightening on the mop handle. For a moment, I thought it might just be my imagination. But then the noise came again, louder this time, echoing against the heavy steel door. I debated whether to check it out or call someone, but curiosity got the better of me. My pulse quickened as I pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside. The room was exactly as it always was, cold, sterile, and unnervingly quiet. The smell of disinfectant was strong, mixed with that faint metallic tang I could never quite place. The gurneys were all in place, the body drawers closed. I glanced around, searching for the source of the noise, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I took a few cautious steps further inside, the soles of my shoes squeaking on the polished floor. As I turned to leave, I heard it again. This time, the noise came from the far corner of the room. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. Slowly, I walked toward the sound, my eyes scanning every shadow. There was a metal cart with supplies near the corner. A clipboard had fallen to the floor. I let out a shaky laugh, feeling a wave of relief. Just the clipboard, I muttered to myself, trying to sound braver than I felt. I picked it up and set it back on the cart. But as I straightened, I felt a rush of cold air brush past me, like someone had walked behind me. I spun around so fast I nearly tripped. The door was closed. The room was empty. I was alone. Or so I thought. Just as I started walking back to the door, I heard something else. A whisper. It was soft, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. I froze in place, straining to hear. It sounded like someone murmuring right next to me, though I couldn't make out the words. That was enough for me. I bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind me. My hands were trembling as I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. A nurse passing by noticed my pale face and asked if I was okay. I hesitated, then told her what had happened. She gave me a knowing look and said, "You're not the first person to hear things in there. Just don't go back alone." I nodded, but her words only made my unease worse. I finished the rest of my shift without going anywhere near the morgue. From that night on, I avoided it unless absolutely necessary. Even then, I always made sure someone was nearby. I never heard the whispers again, but I could still feel the cold air and hear the faint thud echoing in my mind. Some places are better left undisturbed.